Hey guys, Pyguy Rules here, and well, I've had this in the works for quite a while. I've had about 1,017 requests, and here it finally bloody is, so you better well be happy with whatever I have to say about it. My Invader Zim rant. What can I say about Invader Zim? It was a great show, but it didn't belong on Nickelodeon. It never should have been on Nickelodeon. It never will be on Nickelodeon again. It just shouldn't have. It's just the underlying point of why it failed utterly in ratings and by Nick's standards. Simply because it wasn't a show for little kids. It was a darker, edgier show that would have done even better if it wasn't held back by the kiddie network. But the only problem with that is, at the time, there was no place for Invader Zim to go. I mean, think about it. Cartoon Network had almost the same kind of thing as Nickelodeon, where they wouldn't really air too many dark shows. I couldn't really see it fitting in with Cartoon Network shows, unless they maybe put it on Toonami, but it doesn't really fit the Cartoon Network style of animation, and just doesn't fit at all. The only possible place I could see it being was MTV, alongside perhaps Beavis and Butthead and the Ren and Stimpy adult variety hour. Yeah, if you're interested in that, look it up on Wikipedia, and trust me, you won't be after you've read the article. Anyway, that's really the only place it could have fit in, and even then, Invader Zim probably wouldn't have worked in MTV. The interesting thing to note about it is Viacom, which is the company that owns Nick, also owns MTV, so easily enough, Zim could have gone on MTV, and perhaps at one point he even was on MTV. But it wasn't enough. He should have been there from the start, or he should have been on some other network. I don't know. To be honest, the best place for Invader Zim, and this wasn't really an option at the time, would be the internet. Now, the internet, this was back in 1999 or 2001 or whenever, and earlier phases of the internet. Not that early phase of the internet, but it wouldn't have worked back then. But nowadays, if it had been a series on the internet, heck, it could have gone even further. It could have had cussing and whatever you want in there. It could have, the creator could have just basically gotten free reign and done anything he wanted with Zim. Killed Zim, done anything. And even so, I'm still not entirely sure why he went to Nickelodeon for this show. He clearly had a darker show in mind. I mean, the only other thing I could think of when I think of dark children's cartoons would be The Great Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and that never got too dark. Perhaps in the beginning it was a little darker than it was towards the end of its run, but pretty much that's it. And Grimm kind of was successful because, well, it did more of a job balancing the very kiddie comedy. You see, when it came to Adult Swim, when it came to Invader Zim, rhyme, when it came to Invader Zim, the comedy wasn't really in, like, kiddie comedy, that stuff that kids would laugh at. It's more stuff that teenagers like myself would laugh at. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure some kids enjoyed the show, but pretty much simply because it's a show they knew they shouldn't be watching at the time. And to be honest, I don't know if I'd like little kids watching it. I mean, I have some younger cousins. I don't know if I'd be, accepting of them watching it, because it is a little bit edgy. Like when I have kids eventually, I'm not sure if I'd want them exposed to that at a young age. It did get a little gruesome at times. Not any more gruesome than I would mind, but just for younger children, Speaking of Adult Swim, which was my slip of the tongue, that would have been another place that Zim would have fit in very, very well. Unfortunately, Adult Swim didn't really exist in 1999, and even if it did exist, it was only basically Space Ghost Coast to Coast. If anything else, it would have been small. I'm not entirely sure if Adult Swim was around at the time, but I really don't think it was, and I don't think was as big as it is now, big enough to be able to accept like outside sources of cartoons. But Invader Zim would do really well on Adult Swim now. Unfortunately, and this is the huge unfortunately, and I don't want to see a single person write this in the comments, because I'm telling you it flat out right now, Invader Zim will never, ever come back. The creator himself said in numerous interviews that he is not interested in going back to Invader Zim. He has moved on to other new projects. Okay, I don't need to see any comments of saying, "Oh yeah, Zim totally should get a reboot. We should start a petition." No. Zim does deserve a reboot. Yes. Zim will not get a reboot. I am sorry. It will never happen. It's not in my control. Trust me, if I had any influence over the creator, I would make him do it. I would kidnap him and hold him hostage, and I'd make him make more episodes. Well, I just said the plot of a famous movie, but it's more about a novel than TV series. Anyway, point being, it's not going to come back. Fortunately, we were lucky enough to see some new episodes that Nickelodeon had originally forgotten when it was airing on Nicktoons Network. Unfortunately, since then, Zim is not on Nicktoons Network anymore, and if it is, it's got one of those wonky 4 a.m. slots, which just sucks all around. Well, that's pretty much it. I can't really rant upon anything else. I mean, I have no problem with the show itself other than the fact that it really didn't belong on Nickelodeon, and perhaps it's not age appropriate for younger viewers. It really is a brilliant show, as everyone says. It's hilarious, and the voice actor, his name escapes me, but he did numerous cartoons, including Rodney the Squirrel from Squirrel Boy and Daggett from Angry Beavers, which I keep mentioning because I really do like that show. So I just don't know what else to say here. Like, people wanted me to do this rant for such a long time, but I mean, I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, pretty much. If you're already a big fan of Zim, then you already pretty much know the story of everything. And what happened to Zim is pretty much the same thing what happens to every kind of semi-serious show that comes upon Nick. And when I say semi-serious, I don't mean that Zim is not a comedy. I mean that Zim is more of a mature comedy. So anything that comes across as kind of like appealing to the teen-adult audience that Nickelodeon comes across, like Avatar or Zim or, heck, I'm sure there's other examples, but they're just not coming to me at the moment. Anything like that comes along that just has more of a fan base with older audiences, Nickelodeon just doesn't really know how to handle it. It's like, they're like, well, what do we do? I don't know. Let's air all the episodes at once, because then once we've aired all the episodes, we can stop airing it forever. And yeah, I'm using Avatar as an example again. I know I've already ranted upon that quite a few times, but still, I'm furious with Nickelodeon for what they did to him. And, another show, Danny Phantom. I mean, I'm not to say that that's not for kids, but I'm just saying it had a fan base that also ranged from teens, too. I loved the show. The show was great. Butch Hartman's a genius. I mean, he was also the Fairly Odd Parents creator. But the fact of the matter is, Danny Phantom was more of a action adventure show, and it was a comedy too. It definitely was a comedy, but it had more action in it than the typical Nickelodeon show, and so it had like a fan base that ranged from little kids to teenagers to perhaps even adults. I mean, I like the show, so Nickelodeon just doesn't know what to do with these shows. I mean, if I were Nickelodeon, perhaps I'd create another channel just for, I don't know, action shows, or have a specific block on Nickelodeon for action-y shows. And as a matter of fact, Nicktoons Network actually does have a specific block for action-y shows, which include Avatar, My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Danny Phantom. But I mean, still, it's not the same when it's on Nicktoons Network. Don't get me wrong, Nicktoons Network is awesome, but, you know, it'd be nice to see it on the main Nickelodeon, and it would also be nice to see a block that would actually air new episodes of these things, instead of just either old episodes that haven't been aired, or just these series once it's already been finished and is now in syndication. So that pretty much brings me back to the whole Nickelodeon needs a cartoon new episode block, which I've talked about in several other rants. Well, that's pretty much all I can say. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm sorry if I couldn't do any better on ranting. I have no problems with the show, and I don't think that's what you wanted to hear me say. I think you guys wanted me to hear me just talk about how Nick neglected it, and it did. That's pretty much it. Well, I'm Bad Guy Rules, and join me in whatever the heck else I'm doing next.